I'm one of those unlucky people who unfortunately has had to attend more funerals than most of my friend group has. It's been a mix of growing up in a relatively poor area where there were serious drug problems and seeing a lot of people my age and younger pass away well before their time, and being part of the LGBTQ plus community, being part of the disabled community, and just having friends who are a lot older than me. All of that definitely plays a factor in just how many funerals I've been to. Now, you don't get used to going to several funerals throughout your lifetime. You can't just go, oh, just another funeral, no big deal. That's not really how it works. But you do get a little bit desensitized. You start getting more used to being around dead bodies. You start getting a little more used to being around grieving people. And one of the positive sides that's come out of how many funerals I've had to attend in my life is the fact that I have been able to observe grieving people more closely than most people do. And I have learned how to speak to them better, because a lot of people just do your typical like, oh, sorry for your loss, or I'm praying for you, or they're in a better place. And over time I've learned that although your heart's in the right place when you say things like that, it actually tends to do more harm than good for a myriad of different reasons. So I'm trying to unlearn a lot of harmful things that I've learned throughout my lifetime about how to deal with someone who is grieving for any reason, but especially over the loss of another person. Now, something else I have heard relatively often in terms of preparing funeral rites for someone who is not gone yet, but they're in like hospice or something, they're on their way out. And that is the fact that on several occasions when the person had like dementia or in some other way was not in full possession of their mental faculties as they were leaving this plane of existence, I've heard a lot of people say, we'll try to be as respectful as we can, but funerals are actually more for the family than they are for the deceased. And to a certain extent, I understand that sentiment. I understand it because sometimes people can go so out of their way trying to plan this perfect funeral for this person who's not even going to see it happen, that they end up causing harm to themselves or a rift in their family because it ends up getting too expensive or too time consuming or just too difficult overall. And so to a certain extent I understand what they mean, and just the fact that the decedent is not physically present for the funeral. It's the grieving people who are there, and whether you're spiritual or not, you can believe that maybe their spirit is in attendance, or that nothing happens if you're an atheist, and either one is fine. But I believe that when people say things like the funeral isn't for the decedent, it's for the family and the friends and the other grieving people, they're trying to say, stop worrying so much about what they would want because they're not here. So, you need to do what's going to make you feel like you're honoring them. You need to do what's going to make it easier for you to let go of the sad side of this and move on with your life and celebrate their life instead of just mourning them. But unfortunately, the idea of funerals are for the family and friends has a very negative implication when it comes to the transgender community, the queer community as a whole. There's a couple areas in which this idea that the funeral is only for the family and friends and not for the deceased, where we have really been thrown under the bus, and that idea has been used to cause harm to people who love us and to our memory itself. When it comes to things like gay people, all you have to do is watch the movie Bridegroom. That is not an isolated incident. It's unfortunately happened several times. All it takes is one person who unfortunately has enough pull that they can legally decide things for the deceased afterwards, who decides they are not okay with LGBTQ plus people, and they will do everything in your power to make sure that not only can you not make any decisions for the funeral, you don't get to be there at all. It's even happened with married queer couples on several occasions, because unfortunately there are still a lot of laws that do not protect us from things like this. There's a lot of laws in place that make it very, very easy for the family and friends of the person who passed away to bar us from saying goodbye to that person. And unfortunately, on the transgender side of this, there's a reason I thought of making this video today, and it's the fact that if you're not on TikTok, there was someone called that trans guy Milo, and he was absolutely a trailblazer when it came to trying to fight for the rights of transgender people because of all the hateful, disgusting bills that are coming out right now. And unfortunately, he passed away a few days ago. He did take his own life, and he did so because of all of the disgusting hatred that was flying his way for a very long time, amongst other things. You can check out some of his videos and his friends' videos and give them support if you're on that app, because it's a very difficult time for a lot of the transgender community on TikTok right now. And unfortunately, he's gone through the same thing many transgender people do when they die. It's something that has happened so often that I've literally lost track of the number of times I've seen this happen, which is that the instant Milo's obituary hit the newspapers, he was misnamed. He was deadnamed. His family, knowingly and deliberately, even though he presented as a man and told people he was a man, chose to put his dead name in the newspaper for everyone to see. And this is dangerous for such a myriad of reasons. Doing things like that can cause great harm to the people who still love people like Milo, and can be used against them when they're trying to argue that that is not how they should have been addressed in their obituary. I can only imagine, if they already went that far, that there'll be another one of those awful families who dresses him in like female clothing and stuff and doesn't honor him at all for who he was. They'll only honor him for who they wish he had been. And that is the reason why I want to tell you, exercise some caution if you're one of these people who goes around saying things like the funeral is not for the deceased, it's for the family and friends, because unfortunately people use that in a very evil way like this. They use it to make sure that queer people are not remembered for who they were. They do it to make sure that they're remembered for who they wish they'd always been. We already go through this enough during our lifetimes. We already have to deal with so many people that we thought loved us turning on us the instant they realize we're not the little embodiment of what they wanted. And the fact that even in death, we can't escape the homophobia and the transphobia is just horrifying. If we had to deal with so much hate and so much pain and so much suffering just for being who we are when we are alive, the least people can do is honor us after we die. So, like I said, like, this doesn't mean that you absolutely have to just not think that anymore. It doesn't mean that you can't talk about that anymore with like your family and friends. Just understand that there can be a dual meaning to that sentiment, and make sure that you're paying attention at the funeral and the wake and everything else that goes along with it. And if you notice that someone is taking advantage of that idea, that the funeral is only, for the benefit of the family and friends, and it's to the detriment of the decedent, do everything you can to put an end to that, so that things like this hopefully stop happening one day. Sorry about this not being a very happy video. I've been going through a lot of personal stuff lately, and unfortunately this issue did not make things any better. So I'm gonna sign off for now, but as always, do something that makes you happy today, as long as you're causing harm to none, and I'll see all of you again soon.